I think I can handle that one. Can you hear me okay in the back? Good? All right. All right. I'm going to give it another minute or so before we get rolling here, in case anyone trickles on in. All right, Bill's here. We'll get started. All right, so I am Allie Perkins. I'm a fitness associate upstairs in the gym. I'm going to talk to you today about exertion. Um, oh, happy National Exercise Day. Sorry, I forgot that. This is very important. So exertion. We are going to talk about what exertion is, how we measure exertion, and why is exertion even important. We talk about exerting ourselves a lot in class, so we'll touch upon that and where we want your exertion levels to fall for different types of exercise. So, what is exertion? Exertion is defined as the use of a lot of mental or physical effort. When it comes to physical activity, we'll talk about the physical side of it. If you attend Movement with Thought, which is the brain health class, it might be both the mental and physical effort you're using to attend said class. If you attend a cardio or strength and balance class, then it would be more your physical exertion levels, how hard you're working in those classes. And that goes for working out on your own as well. It doesn't just have to relate back to the fitness classes. So how can exertion be measured? We have a few different ways we can measure exertion, from super simple, we just ask you how you're feeling and you give us a number, to a whole face mask setup on a treadmill or a bike that measures the amount of oxygen you're consuming. So it can be either really, really simple or really, really scientific and complex. So on the easier side, we have the rate of perceived exertion. We have two different charts that we use for that, and I'll show you those two in a second. And then we have the talk test. It's a little more concrete than just how you're feeling. I can actually ask you to talk to me, and depending on how you are able to communicate, what your sentences sound like, then we can really gauge your level of exertion. Then we have heart rate. Heart rate can go from super simple to collect to super complex. You can get it like this, or if you have a fancy watch, you can have a whole heart monitor on. And then we have the gold standard test, the VO2. Yeah, so that's your volume of oxygen, by the way. The rate of perceived exertion, we have two charts here. We have the Borg scale, RPE 6 to 20, and the more commonly used RPE of 1 to 10. So you're probably like, Allie, why is Borg 6 to 20? Who starts at 6? Everyone knows you start at 1. That is because the Borg does take heart rate into consideration. Very loosely, it takes heart rate into consideration, but the Borg scale is used more to run off of your heart rate while you are moving, divided by 10 would give you that number. So if my heart rate was at 80 beats per minute, then I would qualify as an 8. It would be considered on the lighter side of things. And if my heart rate was a little higher, depending on what activity I'm doing, I would fall into the very, very hard. Little flaw with the Borg RPE scale is it doesn't take different things into consideration when it comes to heart rate. It doesn't take age into consideration. It doesn't take cardiovascular health into consideration, any medications you might be taking. There are medications that can increase and decrease your heart rate with you having no control over that. So it doesn't take that into consideration. And then we have the more commonly used one. We actually have that one hanging in the gym. If you are on, I believe, an arc or a bike, I think there's one in front of you. You might have to squint to read it. It is kind of far away. Depends on how good your distance is. This one's a little easier to understand for people, the 1 to 10. It's the same scale people use for pain when you show up into the ER on a scale of 1 to 10. What is your pain like? Is it very mild or is it very, very bad? So we use that as well. Pretty simple, pretty easy to use, easy to understand. One minor flaw with the 1 to 10 scale is sometimes people don't exactly understand how to measure their exertion on their own. Sometimes people might take into consideration things like joint pain, I'm a little sore from yesterday's workout, things like that, when that doesn't relate to your level of exertion. Level of exertion is how hard your cardiovascular system is working to get oxygen from point A to point B, wherever point B is. So yeah, those are the easiest, simplest forms of measuring someone's exertion. Yeah. Now we have the talk test. Talk test relates back to the Borg scale here. You'll notice Borg on this side, and then the talk test on this side. It's just a comparison of the two. Talk test is while you are exercising, someone asks you a question. Can you answer said question fairly easily, like you're just kind of standing still, having a casual conversation with someone? That would be considered very light. If you're trying to have a conversation with someone and it's a little broken up and you're huffing and you're puffing in the middle of words or at the end of words between things, then you're in the more moderate. And if you cannot carry on a conversation at all, you're in the vigorous area of exercise. If you have attended a cardio class, Mike or I, depending on the class that day, we'll talk about, we don't want you to be able to talk to your partner. We want you pushing yourself to the point where you can't talk to your partner. We want you in that moderate to vigorous exertion level. So when we hear you talking to your partner, it's very obvious to us that you're not exerting yourself to the extent we would like you in that day. Not all cardio classes are like that. We do have our light and moderate type days where maybe you do get to chit chat with your partner a little bit more. Or maybe your chit chat's just a little broken up by some huffs and puffs, depending on what kind of exercises we're doing that day. So, like I said, it compares to the board, got the 6 to 20. And we got levels of exertion, no exertion, super easy, carrying on a conversation like it's nothing, barely even moving, all the way to can't even catch your breath, no words are coming out, just huffs and puffs. And then we get a little more into the scientific side of things. We got the heart rate now. So heart rate, to begin with, can be taken in quite a few different ways. You can measure your heart rate by finding your pulse on your wrist, finding it in your neck. You can wear a watch. I can tell you my heart rate is something. It's beating. You can wear a watch that'll tell you your heart rate. You can wear a full heart rate monitor that would usually goes around your chest, and that will measure your heart rate. You can even wear leads if you've ever been to cardiac rehab. They'll wear leads, and that's how they measure heart rate there. They're also looking at the way your heart is beating. So quite a few different ways we can calculate heart rate. The pieces of equipment we have upstairs for cardio, the treadmill, recumbent bike, and arc, all have heart rate monitors on them. Take the number it gives you with a grain of salt, though. They're not the most accurate thing. Your watch is also not the most accurate thing. The most accurate things are going to be those heart rate monitors that go around your chest, the lead you would get if you had an EKG or you were in cardiac and pulmonary rehab. Stuff like that's going to be a lot more accurate and fine-tuned to the way your heart is beating. So we have some heart rate zones right here. Less than 57% of your heart rate max would be considered light exercise. Heart rate max can be calculated in a few different ways as well. We can go as simple as 220 minus your age, or we can go as complicated as to literally send you on a treadmill until you reach your maximum heart rate and give up. That one's not as fun, not as appealing to people, but it is the more accurate way to measure your heart rate, because that takes things like cardiorespiratory health into account, the medications you might be on. That is also done in the right setting with the right professionals present. It's not something you just go willy-nilly do up in the gym. But you can willy-nilly take your age and take 220 and subtract your age from it, and that will give you an estimated heart rate max. So for me, having just turned 26, my heart rate max would be 194. This is pretty high, but I'm pretty young. So if I were to fully exert myself and put every ounce of my being into it, my heart rate would be in that 194 area. 195, 196, if I get up to those beats per minute, It's not wildly unsafe. I am young. I'm a healthy adult. So it is okay. Sometimes your doctor will recommend not going above a certain heart rate. Definitely, for sure, listen to your doctor on that. They might not want you participating in vigorous activity. They might want you more in the moderate area, that's 64 to 76% of your heart rate max. And then, so moderate and vigorous. The ACSM, which is the American College of Sports Medicine, recommends 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. So if you wanted to get technical and really figure out, are you getting those 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week, you could take your estimated heart rate max, 220, subtract your age, and then take 64 to 76% of your heart rate max. And then you have your moderate window for heart rate. Then when you come to the gym, if you were to check your heart rate and you would see, oh, I'm right in that moderate to vigorous window. I'm doing great. The ACSM would be so proud of me. Then you're more than welcome to do that. Sometimes that can be a little time consuming. So that's where things like the Borg and the 1 to 10 RPE scale come in, where we can kind of guesstimate moderate versus doing out all of that math. But lucky for you, I did all that math for someone who is 80 years old. So, up in this chart I made, we have an 80-year-old whose heart rate max would be 140 based off of 220 minus age. And I calculated the very light, moderate, vigorous, and near max to maximum effort ranges. So 80 beats per minute would be considered very light. That would be your kind of walking around heart rate, as long as walking around isn't wildly strenuous for you. And then you have 80 to 88 beats per minute, and that would put you in the light category. 89 to 106 would put you right in that moderate window that we want, and then vigorous would be 107 to 134. And if you're feeling really wild, you can head for that 134 to 140, which is your near max to max. We don't really hit that in classes, or we aim not to. For some people, that can be dangerous. It can be a little on the unhealthy side. So we aim for the moderate to vigorous ranges. And we use those ranges because that's what the ACSM and every other exercise source uses. The movement with thought class that I have, where we work on brain health, the goal when you're on a cardio equipment, because you're on a piece of cardio equipment, then you go into a brain health exercise, back to the cardio. You alternate through those two. The goal of the cardio equipment in that class is to get you into that moderate to vigorous heart rate range. That is when your blood flow is moving best. Blood is flying up to your brain to help you do the things you have to do in the dual tasking. Also making you a little tired. You'll also benefit from, in the dual tasking, being a little off your game if your heart rate's a little too high for you. And then over here I have the ways to measure your heart rate. You can, if you want to calculate your heart rate just based off of your wrist, plenty of different ways you can do that. You can go as simple as counting for 15 seconds how many beats are in 15 seconds and multiplying that by 4. Or you can go all the way and count for a whole 60 seconds if you want. That would be the most accurate. So excuse me, I need a sip of water. A little dry behind this mask. So we have our heart rate ranges here for our 80-year-old friends. If you are a few years younger than 80, you can still look at this and kind of take it in and be like, all right, mine would be a little bit higher. I'm a little younger than 80 years old. So my very light I could push myself a little bit more. 80 wouldn't be very light for me. And then if you are a little older than 80 years old, you can take it down a little bit. So the very light would be a little lower. You would have a lower maximum heart rate. You would have a lower very light. And then we have volume of oxygen. So in college, we learned about VO2 max, which is this right here. This woman is having her volume of oxygen being tested, being measured. There are 2 ways that this can be done. One is a treadmill. The other is a bike. And what happens is you have this mask over your face and these tubes that come into this machine that are measuring your oxygen output. No, your oxygen consumption, sorry. How much oxygen are you consuming to do the activity you are doing? And usually when this test is done, it is a maximum effort test. So you are going until failure. Your body cannot go any farther. And these are some ranges I found for some VO2 calculations. Your VO2 max is measured in milliliters per kilogram per minute, which means the milliliters is looking at how much milliliters of oxygen you are consuming. Kilograms is looking at your body weight. And minutes is just looking at the time, how much you're consuming in a minute. So sadly, the best I could find was 65 plus. There was no VO2 max charts out there for those who are over the age of 65. To be fair, I don't think I'd be a fan of that either. So I wouldn't do it. But in the name of science, why not? So if you have a higher VO2 max, meaning you are consuming more oxygen, the better off you are. You're in that excellent category. If you are not consuming a lot of oxygen and you are already exhausted and wiped out and you cannot continue your assessment, then you're down here in the very poor category. VO2 max is more commonly used in athletes along the college and professional levels. That's why stopped at 65 plus. And we have the 18 to 25 and the 26 to 35. Yeah, volume of oxygen. So why is exertion important? Why has Allie rattled on for the past 25 minutes about this thing called exertion? Exertion is really important to pay attention to, because if you're not paying attention to it, your workout could be not the most beneficial. If you come in and you work out and you can have the easiest conversation the entire time you are exercising, you're not huffing and puffing, you're in that light category. And light exercise is good. You're always going to benefit from any kind of exercise. But when you look at your cardiovascular health and your brain health, you really see the benefits in that moderate to vigorous exertion level. And if you are trying to benefit your cardiovascular system and your brain, you are only exercising at a light level, then you're not going to do as much as you could for your cardiovascular system and your brain. It can also, when you talk to your doctor, if your doctor says, hey, we don't want you exerting yourself too much because you are on beta blockers and your heart rate doesn't rise naturally like someone who isn't on beta blockers, then you can pay attention to how much you're exerting yourself so you don't overdo it. Overdoing it is not ideal. Underdoing it, also not ideal. That's why we use that moderate to vigorous zone. So in the cardio classes, when you hear Mike and I say, we don't want you talking to your partner. We want you to push it on this sprint. It's because we want you in that moderate to vigorous zone. We really want you to push yourself to do the best that you can for your heart, your lungs, your blood, and your brain, and everything else that goes with that. All right. So that is my spiel on exertion. Does anyone have any questions for me? And if you wait one moment, Mike will come around with a mic for you. Mike has the mic.
It on? My question is about the amount of time. If you want to get yourself in that moderate, how much time should you spend in that range?
Good question.
Cardio classes, do some vigorous.
Good question. That's a great question, Elaine. Elaine asked, once you get into that moderate and vigorous zone, how long do you want to be there? Like I said earlier, the ACSM recommends the 150 minutes per week. That stretches from Sunday to Sunday. So if you are coming to a cardio class and you do that sprint, and you get into that moderate and vigorous zone, and then you go do your active rest station, your heart rate comes back down. We want your heart rate to come back down in that moment because we want to test your heart rate recovery. If your heart can recover faster, it means your heart is stronger. If you get into that moderate and vigorous zone, you do your active rest, and then you come out of your active rest and your heart rate is still really high, you're still really huffing and puffing, your heart did not recover the way we needed it to during the active rest. Does that make sense, Elaine? Does that kind of answer your question? The amount of time you want to be there is an overall amount of time. The minutes in class total up into the big picture. Do you have anything you want to add to that? It's not on.
Keep switching the on off. And I think part of that is also the higher your heart rate is, the higher the intensity of any exercise, the shorter amount of time that you're going to be able to perform at that intensity, right? So sprints, there's a reason that the sprinters, they conk out at 100 yards or 100 meters, right? And there's a reason that marathoners go slower than sprinters, right? And so that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
The higher the intensity or the higher the heart rate, the shorter amount of time you'll be able to perform at that level. And then the more when we get into the moderate, then the longer you'll be able to perform at that intensity.
Yeah, and you've probably noticed that on the bike as well, if you've ever been on the fan bike. I know, Julie, it's your favorite. Know how much you love it. I'll bring it out every day just for you. On the fan bike, when you're sprinting and all of a sudden you're just completely conked, you have hit your max watts, you're just done. That's because you exerted yourself to the fullest of your ability. And your body's like, hey, shut it down. So you need a little break. That's because you got up into that vigorous zone and you can't maintain that as long with the way your muscles work. And that's all about fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, which would be a whole other discussion. Does anyone? I think Dwight has a question.
Is a heart rate at all associated with body weight or sex? That is, female.
Body weight does play into it. If you are on the more overweight side, your heart already has to work harder, so you already have that resting higher heart rate. Yeah. And if you are a marathon runner, you already have that very low resting rate. And that's why the VO2 is the ideal solid way to measure your level of exertion. Whereas the heart rate percentages don't necessarily take into account your resting heart rate, your body weight, your gender. I believe women tend to have a higher heart rate. I can't remember how much it's by. It's not an absurd amount, but women tend to have a higher heart rate than men. There are equations you can use that are more specific on your heart rate max, which will take those things into account. It'll take in your body weight, your resting heart rate, your gender, activity level, maybe. And those are just equations. We can also measure max heart rate through assessments. And we can do, there's sub-tests where you get to a sub-max heart rate, then you kind of calculate max heart rate from there. And then there are full-out max heart rate tests where you go until you fail, similar to the VO2 with the oxygen consumption.
It's interesting if you look at large vertebrates and small vertebrates. The hummingbird heart rate is exceedingly fast, and the elephant's heart rate is very slow.
It's similar with humans. A fetal heart rate is going to be significantly higher than someone who is 75 plus years old.
I was wondering.
Fetal heart rates, they're like in the 140s, I think. But yeah, age, gender, body weight.
A lot of variables.
Yes, there are a lot of variables in it. The 220 minus age is the basic generalized calculation for heart rate max.
And then I just one other question. You talk a lot about exercise, getting your heart rate up, and brain, having a strong brain. Are there good studies that show that getting your heart rate up into the moderate to vigorous level actually do increase your capacities, your mental capacities?
Increased mental capacities, I'm not sure. But preventing and slowing the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's in someone who is at risk, there are studies that show cardio exercise, getting into that moderate to vigorous zone, is beneficial for them. Cardio exercise is actually the most studied when it comes to brain health. There's a ton of information about getting your heart rate up for your brain. It is also not just good for your cognitive health, but it's good for your mental health, your emotional well-being. I would like more studies on ways to improve brain health with exercise. It kind of lacks in the resistance training department. But cardio is the most studied. And then the stuff like dual tasking that we do in movement with thought, where you're doing two things at once, the next studied exercise for brain health. Anyone else have any other questions?
My question just relates to your testing your heart rate. I was just wondering what is the best method if can you use the machines upstairs to get your heart rate? Or is there a watch that's more accurate than another one other than stopping and, you know,
So you can use the machines if you would like. I do believe one of the recumbent bikes is not measuring heart rate right now. So keep that in mind. But
what did you say?
I believe one of the recumbent bikes is not measuring heart rate right now. I think the heart rate reader is broken.
Okay.
But
they're accurate enough so you can use them if you need
you
to
can
keep
use
track?
them. You can use them if you would like. If you don't want to stop and count, I wouldn't say it's the most accurate. I also wouldn't say a watch is the most accurate. Something like a pulse oximeter would be a little bit more accurate. The little thing you put on your finger that tells you the amount of oxygen that your body has and your heart rate. Those would be a little bit more accurate without having a big clunky heart rate monitor on.
So if you have one of those, you should just bring it up to the exercise room.
Yeah, if you were looking to keep track of your heart rate during exercise, yeah. But the wearables, like a watch, are pretty straightforward. It does all of the work for you. The accuracy has gotten better since they came out, but I still would take that with a grain of salt.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yes, the watch and the equipment are very close. The technology in machines and the technology in watches is wildly improving, probably as we speak right now. But it's still not the most accurate. It's great for your leisurely use, but if you were in a hospital setting having a stress test done, they would have a heart rate monitor on you for that. They wouldn't rely on what the treadmill is saying.
And while the accuracy is, we know the accuracy of any wearable is going to be hit or miss. The reliability, on the other hand, is pretty strong, right? So we can have a reliable trend line. If you're performing any vigorous exercise and you have a wearable, then you'll have a good, solid, reliable trend line that, okay, this was more than yesterday, right? Even though the accuracy might be off by a certain number of beats per minute, right? You can certainly see, okay, this versus the previous day versus the previous day, so you can have that good solid trend line from a reliability.
Consistently like off. Yeah, so if you have a smartwatch of some sorts, I have a Apple Watch. If you have a Fitbit or a Garmin or Mike, what is the name of yours?
I have a Coros.
Which I had never heard of till I met Mike.
Coros.
If you have anything like that, it's probably measuring your heart rate. There are some Fitbits I know that don't have the heart rate technology in them yet. Those are usually the ones that just do like your steps. But the newer Fitbits, all of the Apple Watches, all of that fun, smart technology measures your heart rate and will measure your heart rate through exercise so you can see where you were while you were exercising, especially if you're doing something like a cardio class where we're getting your heart rate up and then we want it to come down a little bit and then we're getting it back up. We can see exactly what it's doing. It's pretty cool.
When is the best time of day to exercise
That's a very good question. I don't think there is, to my knowledge, there is no best time of the day for exercise. I think that's more of a personal thing. And this is where Mike and I differ a little bit. Mike likes to wake up first thing in the morning and jump right into his workout. He doesn't even have his coffee. Do you? Okay. He'll have his coffee and then he'll jump right into his workout at 4 a.m. I am fast asleep at 4 a.m. I prefer to work out when I get home from work. When I get home, if I sit down on the couch, I will fall asleep. So instead, I go and I work out. Instead of sitting on the couch and falling asleep, I get my workout done, and then I'm more productive the rest of the day. So I think of time to work out as a personal thing, what works for your schedule, what makes you the happiest. I can't work out too close to bedtime because I won't sleep after. All the endorphins and the blood flowing and my higher heart rate will make it harder for me to fall asleep. Why they recommend not exercising close to bedtime. But yeah, some people prefer the morning like Mike does. I prefer the afternoon. It's whenever you can fit in your solid workout. All right, any other questions? All right. You're welcome. Thank you for coming, everyone. Yay. You have plenty of time to go grab a drink, take a quick bathroom break. Yeah. Pick up your Claritin. If you're anything like me, your allergies already started. Which one benefits you?